So we're going to begin by looking at the gastrointestinal tract as a whole. So the horse is classified anatomically as a non-ruminant herbivore. So what does that mean? Well, in non-ruminants, such as pigs, they rely predominantly on enzymatic digestion. And that means digestion that takes place in the small intestine by enzymes that are secreted in that area, and they rely very little on fibre degradation in the large intestinal environment. In contrast, ruminants rely very much on fibre degradation, and this takes place in the rumen environment, which houses a large microbial population that breaks down the fibre and releases end products that the ruminant uses as an energy source. And this all takes place before what we call the gastric environment, the stomach environment. And the horse sits somewhere in between these two. So it's a non-ruminant herbivore. It relies on enzymatic digestion in the foregut, which is the stomach and small intestine, but the horse also relies very much on fibre degradation in the large intestinal environment. The gastrointestinal tract of the horse begins at the lips and ends at the anus. And we think of the gastrointestinal tract as having three functional regions: the stomach and the small intestine, which collectively we often refer to as the foregut, and then the large intestinal environment, which we often refer to as the hindgut. And in the foregut, this is where we see enzymatic digestion taking place. So very much like what we described for non-ruminants, such as the pigs. And then the large intestinal environment, well, this is where fibre degradation takes place. And that can be compared to the rumen of the ruminant. So the rumen environment that houses a large microbial population. So when we think about the constituent parts of the gastrointestinal tract, these include the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the cecum, the large colon, the small colon, and the rectum. And you can see how all of these different parts fit together in the diagram here. There are also associated organs, so the teeth, the tongue, the salivary glands, the liver, and also the pancreas. When we think about the gastrointestinal tract of the horse as a whole, this is approximately 30 metres long in a mature adult horse, with a total volume of around about 200 litres. And the gastrointestinal tract changes in diameter and throughout the various sections, and is also lined with mucous membranes. So let's begin at the mouth. Digestion begins at the mouth, and the upper lip guides the food into the horse's mouth. And the feed then is torn by the upper and lower incisors, and you can see these in the diagram here. There are 12 incisors in total, 6 on the upper jaw and 6 on the lower jaw. So when the horse is eating grass, for example, the lips guide the grass into the horse's mouth, and then the grass is torn by these upper and lower incisors. And then the feed moves to the molars and the premolars. So again, you can see where these are situated in the diagram. You've got 12 premolars in total and 12 molars. And these are what we call the grinding teeth. Okay, they reduce the particle size of the feedstuff. And this is really important for digestion. Feedstuffs need to be reduced in particle size to allow the enzymes to access the constituents of the feed, and also for the fibrous fraction, for the enzymes produced by the microbial populations in the hindgut to have access to the fibre to break them down and produce the end products that are used as an energy source for the horse. So, chewing, also known as mastication, is essential for digestion. So it's really important that we make sure that everything is okay with our horse's teeth and that we have them checked on a regular basis. So remember in the previous video, we talked about the horse chewing a lot, eating on an almost continual basis. Well, when we look at how much the horse chews, it chews somewhere between 70 to 90 times per minute, depending on the type of feedstuff that it's chewing. And what's important to note about horses is that they only produce saliva as a direct response to chewing. So they don't salivate when they see a food, they salivate as a direct response to chewing. And they also need to chew to satisfy the behavioural needs as well. So having mentioned saliva production, there are three main salivary glands. There's the parotid, which is the largest, there's the mandibular, and there's the sublingual. Saliva composition is predominantly water, so about 99% of saliva is water, but it also contains some buffers as well, some electrolytes. And these buffers are important because what happens is when the saliva is swallowed and goes into the stomach, it buffers that environment. So what that means is it keeps the pH of the stomach at the right level. So saliva has virtually no digestive enzymes, so it doesn't start to break down the feed. But it would seem that the main function of saliva is mainly lubrication to facilitate the swallowing of the feedstuffs and also to buffer the stomach contents as well. So saliva production is really important, and the amount of saliva a horse produces per day is around about 35 to 40 litres in an adult horse. This is predominantly from the parotid salivary gland, and the rate at which this is produced is very much reliant on food intake and mastication. So the amount of saliva that's produced will very much rely on the type of feedstuff that the horse is eating. So more saliva will be produced from feedstuffs that are high in fibre and long chop fibre. So for example, grass hay will require a lot of chewing, and that will produce a lot of saliva. And also if the food's very dry, then there will be more saliva produced. So the higher the dry matter content of the food, the more saliva will be produced as well. So once the feedstuff's been swallowed, it will travel from the mouth down the esophagus and into the stomach. So the esophagus itself is around about 1.5 metres long, and it's lined with squamous epithelium, and it has a tight sphincter at either end, and that prevents food moving from the stomach back into the esophagus.